Hello and welcome back to Family Tech, where you get to be the tech expert of your home. So today I have a guest whose name I kind of like. Uh, her name is Sarah, just like me. But Sarah Peterson also wrote the book called Momfluenced. The book is about how mom influencers uh, culturally impact women psychologically as consumers, performers of their stories, and as mothers. So, having spent the last 15 years or so in this influencer world, I was super intrigued by the title. So, I got the book on Audible, loved your take on everything. So, I wanted to invite you on my show to talk about it. So,
Yeah.
tell me a little bit more about, what influenced you to create the book and a little bit more about it.
Yeah, the impetus to write the book really came from my own experience consuming momfluencer content, particularly as a new mother trying to sort of find my own maternal identity and really looking to these women that I found online as sort of blueprints. And I was really struck by feeling like I wanted to emulate them and aspire to their lifestyles while also understanding that what I was seeing was only one, little piece of their pie. And that, of course, motherhood is not always beautiful and always sunshine and rainbows. But I still found myself wanting that. So, yeah, I just wanted to kind of understand the disconnect between wanting what I knew was not real and also, my own maternal struggles.
Right. Totally get that. So I'd like to start with kind of a softball question. What have you recently been influenced to purchase?
What have my gosh, I'm trying to think. Um, I have not purchased this yet, but I have gotten the ad a million times, and I'm considering purchasing it,
Yeah.
and I'm also writing about it because I think the ad is really funny. It's a face cream by Ursa Major, and I've gotten this ad on Instagram, like, at least 10 times, and something about the ad is just really absurd and compelling, and I keep thinking about this face cream, so that's that.
I totally get it. I have many purchases from Instagram ads and Facebook ads. It's super targeted and it knows me. So it knows
Mhm.
exactly what is going to resonate with me and gonna make me purchase. So
Totally.
totally get it. My recent fail is I have mainly, like, straight hair, but, I bought a, like, brush that was like a straightener, and, like, my hair's so thin, like, it just didn't work at all. I ended up giving it to my friend, I'm like, "I can't use this," so, um, didn't work out for me, but there have been many products that have worked out,
Mhm.
so I totally get it. So my question to you is what do you think is problematic about like these social media influencers these days?
I mean, there are many things that can be problematic. Of course, not, all influencers are the same. And I would never want to, generalize and assume they're
For sure.
all, selling the same thing, the same messaging.
Right.
One thing particularly for momfluencers that can be tricky is that motherhood is not one size fits all. Our experiences of motherhood are so dependent on so many external factors, many of which are out of our control, and many of which are systemic failures in this country. So buying, under eye cream that a momfluencer says is, curing her under eye circles because her baby's up all night is not going to make you well rested. It's
Right.
not going to help you with your newborn. Only like, a total overhaul of our maternal healthcare system could do that. So I think looking to momfluencer culture as a way to fix the massive, massive, massive problems that are impacting most mothers is where we're gonna kind of get into trouble.
Mhm.
Um, That being said, if you're looking for a guide for, good activities for neurodivergent toddlers, ages 3 to 5, you might be able to find a really specific, great online resource for that.
Right.
So I really do think it's all how you go about, incorporating social media into your life and incorporating this content from like a really thoughtful place and a self-aware place.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And I liked in your book how you're talking in the chapter about disruption, how some people who just kind of claim to have these like social views or whatever, but aren't really doing activism, like
Yeah.
pretend activism, where I'm, okay, yeah, I really believe in this, but I'm not really putting myself out there, like, putting, my stuff on the line um, to
Right.
have that activism. So I think that's something to think about, when you see these influencers and you're like, okay, are they just saying that or, whatever.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah, performative
Yeah,
activism
yeah, yeah.
versus yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So what do you think it is that like draws us to these influencers? Like, and not just ones like where it's that super specific neurodivergent from 3 to 5, like that's super easy to like figure out. But
Right.
these ones that are more damaging, I think, to our psyche, what draws us to these influencers?
Um, I think the mythology of the ideal mother in this country is really ingrained in so many of our psyches. So many of us, especially if we're socialized as girls, are taught to view motherhood as like the penultimate goal. We're taught to view our lives as mothers as being, huge priorities and huge identity shifts. And if we're struggling with motherhood, we're not taught to ask for outside help. We are taught that we have all the tools within us ourselves. So I think often we are just looking for an easier, better way to embody motherhood because so many of us are struggling. Completely unreasonable burdens are placed upon mothers' shoulders in this country. So it makes complete sense that we're, thirsty for anything that's going to make our lives more, smooth. Um, and I think it's hard to sit with the challenges of motherhood sometimes. I think we want to believe that, if we buy this product or follow this sleep advice or listen to this expert on whatever it is, that our whole lives will radically change. And I don't think it's that easy, unfortunately. I totally understand why we, want to hope for something better. That makes complete sense to me.
Yeah, and that really makes sense and resonates with me too because I live in Utah. We were living in Southern California. I had my daughter, and I freaked out and I said, "Oh my gosh, I have to be a stay-at-home mom. We can't afford it here in Southern California." So we moved to Utah so that I could be a stay-at-home mom. And I took about 2 weeks of that and I was like, that's not really for me
Yeah.
actually.
Right.
So, I went back to work, but we totally upended our life because I thought like this was what I was supposed to be doing.
Totally.
And then I started doing it and I'm like, "Oh, yeah, no, I hate this."
Right. Right. Totally.
Yeah, so, like, seeing other people like and this is before the influencer culture for sure,
Mhm.
but just seeing that, you know, that I'm not just this, like, like a homemaker type person,
Mhm.
I think is damaging for some people who, like, think that that's supposed to be their whole identity.
Totally, for sure.
So technically, you and I could both be considered influencers. So how can people discern from like what is true and what's just being shilled for money? Like it's a really hard line to walk, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that because somebody is getting paid for their work, we should automatically um, you know, write them off as phony or as trying to trick us.
Right.
especially monetized momfluencers, like they are doing a job. They are fulfilling the same role that traditional women's magazines and media have for so long, and they deserve to be paid for their work. If we're, clicking on their outfit to buy a sweater from the Gap that they have sponsored content with, like that doesn't I
Right.
don't think there's anything inherently bad about that they're getting a percentage of that sale. Like, we were gonna buy the
Right.
sweater from the Gap regardless.
Right. Right.
So, yeah, I think I guess I think it's a little unreasonable for us to hold momfluencers to expect them to give us everything, to be completely vulnerable, to share all their personal details with us in the name of quote unquote authenticity.
Right.
Um, they are doing a job, and hopefully they're honest about their product recommendations. But I think we as consumers also have to be responsible about, like knowing that this is a type of marketing. Like, they're being
Right.
paid to market for, various companies. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think some of it is just self-education and awareness.
Yeah, I totally get that. So, like if I'm watching TV and I see a commercial or YouTube and I see an ad, I should kind of make that similar. Okay, if I see that ad, I might look at it like, oh, that looks interesting. And then do a little more research on my own to see if that's something that I actually do want to purchase.
Mhm, totally.
Yeah. And just because it's an influencer saying it doesn't necessarily mean it's bad or good.
Right,
Um,
totally.
Yeah, totally makes sense. And I do struggle with that. Like, I don't share a lot of like my personal life. Like, Instagram stories is kind of like the bane of my existence. I'm like, I don't even know what to do with this. Just because like what I share is like tech advice. And I'm like, nobody cares that I'm sitting at my desk, like working all day.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, like, I don't really share my personal life very much, but I can see that it, like, kinda costs me some audience because, like, people don't really feel a connection to me, which, I mean, they
Mhm,
shouldn't just 'cause they just come to me for the tech advice and then they go away.
mhm.
Um, so anyway, that's definitely something I struggle with, like,
Yeah,
I'm not interested in sharing my personal life out there.
right, right.
But so are there I you called a lot out in your book, which were great. I followed a bunch of them, but are there influencers out there that you really do enjoy watching and watch on a regular basis?
Yeah, I love, love, love Laura Danger. She's on TikTok and Instagram, and her whole platform is, egalitarian gender roles in the home. I love Casey Davis. She talks about care work as being morally neutral, and has a lot of really actionable resources for just, the day-to-day grind of keeping a home, which it's daily work, and many of us struggle with it. And she has really great practical tips. Who else do I really love? I love Rebecca Tossig. She's at Sitting Pretty, and she's just a beautiful lyrical writer. And she also writes about being a disabled mom, which is like really illuminating, enlightening viewpoint that I think, especially those of us who are not disabled really can benefit from. Yeah, those are three that jump to my mind immediately. But yeah, there's so many.
Yeah, and, like, if you don't have her book yet, super easy, Kindle, Audible, whatever you want. Like you said, or like I said, there's so many creators, in there that you feature and talk about, so, definitely checking any of them out too. And I really like, I didn't put this in the questions that I was planning on asking you, but, I talked a lot about the, social media advisory from the Surgeon General, who really I liked it and I was prepared to hate it because I generally don't like those things that come out from the government. But he really highlighted the good and the bad that can be with social media, and highlighted these like marginalized communities who are finding community on social media, and that's something you really highlight too in your book. um, can you touch on that really quick?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, social media can be such an invaluable resource for people who might not, live close to an actual, brick and mortar resource, for example, or who might, because of geographical limitations, you know, not be able to access certain services or certain, community supports. I'm thinking of Mia O'Malley, who I feature in the book, and she is a fat momfluencer who provides so many incredible resources for fat friendly medical care providers, which is a huge, huge issue, finding somebody who is going to treat you as a person, and who's going to give you good medical care as a person in a larger body. And somebody can just follow Mia O'Malley, go to her stories where she has these resources, and then be connected to a doctor who's going to give good health care. And that's like a huge, huge, huge thing that would not be easily accessible were it not for social media.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think there's so much good that can come with it. You just need to, maybe limit your time, don't get sucked in, and do those kind of things also for your children. But make sure they're able to see that there can be good. But one thing I talked to the American moms about is making sure you don't find yourself in an echo chamber. So you're in social media and it's going to be feeding you content that you enjoy, and just make sure you keep trying to confuse the algorithm as to kind of which side you're leaning towards so that you're still getting content from both sides because, finding yourself in this echo chamber can be really damaging too.
Totally.
So a lot of things are discussed about social media's effect on teen mental health. That this advisory from the Surgeon General is all about teens, basically. But what kind of effect are you seeing on like these perfect moms having on moms' mental health?
Um, it's upholding this very unattainable standard that isn't achievable for many or, most women. And I think motherhood is an intensely vulnerable experience. You're forced into a certain level of powerlessness, in many ways as a mother. And it's really easy to feel as though you're failing or as though you're doing the wrong thing. Like the stakes are really, really high when it comes to mothering. So I think it's very easy to get into sort of a shame spiral, into sort of a everybody but me is doing it right. And this is where I think like having conversations with yourself is really useful. Kind of checking in with yourself after engaging with social media and asking like, am I feeling better? Am I feeling worse? Am I feeling neutral? Like, how is this impacting my mental health? Is really like kind of a necessary thing to do regularly.
I totally agree with that. Maybe we should have the social media companies like send little notifications after you've closed the app or something. Hey, so how did that make you feel today? Is there anybody you need to unfollow?
Hmm.
That
Totally.
sounds great. So I'd love to dig into kind of the other side because we're talking more about like being influenced, but on the other side of like sharing, um, I'd love to talk to you about this whole Ruby Frankie situation. Since that case is currently ongoing, she had her channel 8 passengers and overshared a lot of her kids' lives. So what do you have any opinions on that? Like, and this is kind of before all of this, but like just when she was actually on YouTube and sharing her kids' lives.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a ton of opinions about her case specifically. I will say I think the issue of consent and privacy when it comes to children is just impossibly tricky to navigate. I don't necessarily see how children can meaningfully consent to participating in social media, simply because their brains aren't fully developed and they have no way of understanding what participating in social media might look like or feel like to them later in their lives.
Yeah.
It really reminds me of, child actors. Like, how can
Right.
a 6-year old sign a 3 movie contract and fully understand what that entails, you know?
Yeah.
So I think consent is really difficult. And I think, yeah, I was really encouraged to see the Illinois bill passed, which is essentially, putting labor laws into effect for children of influencers whose parents' income is contingent on their participation.
Right.
So I think, industry standards to protect children's finances are great,
Yeah.
but I don't think that really addresses issues of consent.
Yeah.
And I think there's other countries that have the right to be forgotten laws. So if a child grows up and looks at the content, her parents put online, they can, petition a judge to have it all deleted. So I think that would also be a great step forward.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, I do feature my kids occasionally on some reels and stuff, but like you said, are they really old enough to consent? But I always like ask them like, "Hey, I have this idea for a reel. Are you interested in participating?"
Totally.
And if they're not, then I'm like, "Okay, cool. Like, I'll think of something different."
Yep.
And sometimes they're not. You're like, "Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I don't want to do that one." And I'm like, "Okay, that's fine."
Hmm.
But you bring up a good point as to like, well, I mean, they're 14 and 18 at this point,
Yeah.
so they're a little older, but yeah, and sometimes like my son will be like, yeah, but I don't want to show my face or something like that. So
Mhm.
we'll record it in a way where his face isn't shown or something.
Right.
But
Right.
um but yeah, that's something for me to think about. Like, well, are they really even old enough to consent to that?
Right.
Even though I've asked their permission
Right.
ahead of
Right.
time.
I mean, certainly different, an 18-year-old versus a
Well,
5-year-old
sure,
is
yeah, a little
but no,
different.
I hear you.
Yeah. Um, so do you think like the ones who do overshare or like are having their kids as part of the content? I mean, it broke my heart seeing some of I hadn't heard of her before all of this stuff came out,
Yeah.
but they're around the dinner table and she like or I think her husband was reading off texts like that her son was getting and like publishing this on like YouTube. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like,
Yeah.
why would you do that to your child? And the child is clearly embarrassed and like, and they're definitely embarrassing them. Like, do you think the parents that do this like are understanding what they're actually doing to their kids?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I don't know.
It's a
This
hard
is
question. Yeah.
I mean, because these are all individuals. Yeah, I don't know. It's really hard to imagine, it's hard to imagine doing that. It feels, not great.
Yeah.
It
Definitely feels
feels
icky. Yeah.
yeah, it feels like, abuse is obviously on a spectrum, but
Well, sure.
yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I
Yeah.
don't have an answer for that
Yeah.
one.
Sorry. Like, I just want to talk to somebody about this. Like, do
I
they
know.
really get it?
I
Like,
know. I know. I know.
so like if we are when we kind of gave a couple examples, but if we are going to share something about our kids, like what should we do? What should we think about? Even if I'm not an influencer and I'm just like sharing something on my personal Facebook, like what should we kind of ask ourselves?
I think it's useful to center the storytelling on, ourselves. I think it's totally possible to talk about the experience of motherhood without talking about our kids, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like say I'm struggling with potty training. I'm struggling with my feelings about potty training. You know what I mean? I'm struggling with
Sure.
not feeling in control. I'm struggling with feeling inadequate as a parent. Like, there are ways to talk about this stuff that don't require specifics that might invade our children's privacy, I think.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, to center it on like the maternal or parental experience rather than, the child's story. Like if something is happening to your child, that is their story and their story to tell versus
Mhm.
I can totally talk about, struggling with feelings that relate to parenthood in a way that doesn't implicate my kids, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does totally make sense. Um, do you think there are I mean, so my daughter turned 18, so I posted a bunch of pictures, but, like, this is on my private Facebook. I didn't, post it on my influencer page.
Yeah.
But, like, even in those private settings, it can still not be private, nothing is private,
Right,
even
right.
for adults. So is there anything we should really think about in those situations too?
Gosh, I don't know. Um, yeah, I mean, I think just go in knowing that the internet is
Yeah.
never a private place, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I don't know, think about like what sort of function do I want this to serve for me personally? Like, what sort of feeling do I want to get from this? Like, maybe I can get it a different way that doesn't involve social media.
Right.
Maybe I just want to tell, a good friend about like an achievement related to my parent. Like, I think there's other ways to sort of get what we're looking for,
Right.
that don't require social media stuff.
Yeah, and that totally makes sense. It just it has nothing to do with parenting or being a mom, but
Right.
with Wordle, I love playing Wordle, but I'm not gonna like post it on my like Facebook page every day. Like, so I have just like a little text group of like 3 or
Mhm.
4 friends, and we post our Wordles like just to each other every day.
Yeah,
And that's
totally.
really fun for me, but like
Mhm.
has nothing to do with like overshare. Like, but we could, take that kind of example and put it in our personal life. Do you have a text group that just has like your extended family in it,
Yeah,
that you can share pictures and things in there instead of, for the entire world to see?
totally.
As our kids are growing up and they start oversharing and there's so many kids who like aspire to be YouTube sensations. So how can we kind of talk to them about this oversharing and what they should still keep private?
I think, we can be honest with our own struggles. I think sharing stories of failure can be good for kids to learn from. And emphasize like how hard it is for us as adults,
Yeah.
as, like I'm 41 and it's really, really hard.
Right.
Um, to sort of disabuse them of the notion that it's easy for anyone. Like
Yeah.
it's just really hard and it's a brand new technology in terms of
Yeah.
like, the human species. Like this is all brand new and we're all
Yeah.
figuring it out as we go. Um,
Right.
and I don't know, I try to like talk to my kids about like I want you to experience life to the fullest and like, I want your brain to like function to its fullest and like cuz I think sometimes kids are like you're just being mean or you're just being like a downer.
Right.
Um so like rooting it in like it's because I want you to experience, everything life has to offer outside of a screen.
Right, right. And I think one of the things I try and instill in my kids is like to be aware of their digital footprint, and that includes the stuff that I've shared. You
Mhm.
know, I'm like, okay, these are the things that I've basically said about you online, and this is the stuff that you're saying about yourself online. And where can we maybe delete something or clean something up? Because there's influencer, celebrities that get canceled for something they said like, 15 years ago when
Mhm.
it probably, was still not appropriate at that time, but the timing was different and it had different kind of connotation back then or whatever. And today they're getting in trouble for it. And I just kind of try and show my kids that kind of thing. Like, is there anything that you think you're going to regret, you
Mhm.
know, 10 years down the road or when you're applying to college or applying for a job or anything like that? Those kind of things we should not have online.
Right. Totally.
So let's kind of go back over to like your book and stuff. And I really want to talk a little bit more about the disruption chapter, because I thought that was super interesting of like how people are using social media, like you were saying, like, okay, this doctor is good and this doctor's not, I'm going to drive 2 hours to this hospital because it's going to give me better care. How can people in like these marginalized communities find those like people who are going to help them out?
I mean,
Yeah.
I don't really have a great answer for that other
Yeah.
than, like specific search terms. The more
Sure.
specific your search terms are, the better.
Yeah.
Um, I would say like rest assured that they're out there.
Right.
Like there's so many diverse resources on social media that, are are there, and it's just often algorithms feed us the same thing after the same thing after the same thing, so it might not
Yeah.
be, you know, immediately clear that they're there, but they are there.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. Um, and then kind of to wrap it back up into like getting influence. So if I'm on Instagram and I'm getting fed this ad over and over and I can't stop thinking about it, I'm a person that is highly influenced.
Mhm.
I'd get invited by a brand to some event, and this was back when I was just blogging, um, you know, 15, 20 years ago. And, I'd get invited to this brand event and like I come away like, oh my gosh, this brand is the best brand in the entire world.
Uh,
Like, how can I kind of, not fall victim to that kind of influence?
um, I guess just, like, reminding ourselves that, a lot of this, "Hey girl, hey, BF," like, girl to girl, mama to mama, like, vernacular is employed for the express purpose of getting us to spend money.
Right.
We don't know these people, we are strangers to them, and yeah, social media is a marketplace, it's sure it can provide communities, and resources, but it's also a shopping destination. So to just be really clear about that.
Yeah, for sure. So is there anything else you wanted to talk about, you know, online, social media, getting influenced, being influencers?
I don't think so. Yeah, I think yeah, these were great questions. Thank you.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. We do have a couple of questions that came in, on, or at least some comments. We'll just kind of touch on that. I'm so glad I raised my kids pre-social media. We didn't know about gender reveal parties, leprechaun traps. Oh yeah, tooth fairy traditions, and more. So exhausting for these poor young moms to keep up. I
Yeah.
totally see that.
Mhm. I will say I'm a big fan of opting out. There's no like grandmother law that says we have to do the leprechaun traps. Do you know what I mean? You know what I
Right.
mean? Like we can simply not do some of these things. I know it doesn't seem that that's possible sometimes, but we can just say no to some of this stuff. So,
Right.
and I think that can be really freeing.
Yeah, and I'm a big like, I've never done an Elf on the Shelf.
Mhm.
I don't do like I said, I'm not a very good stay-at-home mom, so I just I don't fall victim to any of that because 'cause I'm just like, "Yeah, that's just too much work." Um,
Right.
but I think that brings up a good point too, because this is something that, I've been struggling to understand, and that's like these like promposals and stuff where, kids feel the need to, go above and beyond to ask somebody to a dance,
Mhm.
and kids who aren't comfortable doing that are just opting out of going to the dance, and I feel that's, like, really not disingenuous, I'm not trying to think of the word, but, um, I feel like they get left out because
Yeah.
they're not wanting to I got asked to prom from a phone call, and he's like, "Hey, so I've got this thing on June 13th, you wanna come with me?" I'm like, "Yeah, what is it?" He's like, "Yeah, it's called prom." I'm like, "Okay, cool, let's go." You know? It was a
Yeah.
different back then for sure, but,
Mhm.
um do you think there's anything like momfluencers can do to kind of reel that stuff back in?
No, I mean, I think it's on us. Like,
Right?
because, like, they're going to keep selling these things, they're going to keep, posting pumpkin patch photos. I mean, that's not going anywhere, so it's really on us to just ask ourselves, like, "Is this going to bring joy to me? Like, is this a meaningful thing for me to participate in, or am I doing it just to check a box?"
Yeah, for sure. And then we've got this one. I just don't understand it all filming, cleaning, or feeding your kids normal life. The problem is they make money and promote goods and services. So it's the ridiculous shopping and oversharing. I can see that. But like I said, there's good and there's bad on social media. So I would say both of that. Um, And then we have this. Oh, this is good. Asking, is this my story to tell? If it's you as your daughter's mom celebrating her birthday, yes, that's your story. If your child is getting text from somebody, it's not your story to tell.
Right, right. Yeah, that's a good distinction.
Yeah, for sure. And I like that and I'm thinking of like another story, and I this really doesn't have anything to do with social media, but something that like as moms we should be asking ourselves. Um, somebody was complaining about the way that their child is getting married because they weren't able to attend the marriage ceremony
Mhm.
and I'm like, but that's not really your call. It's their wedding. They can do whatever they want.
Right.
Being upset about the way that your child is deciding to do something isn't helpful.
Right, right, right.
Yeah. Um, and then I think this is our last comment. We've got my adult kids still don't do Facebook or Instagram. It's just something my husband and I never really did, and they saw our example of not making it a need. And it's a choice for every family, I think. Like we were saying before, there can be really good things on social media.
Mhm, mhm. But yeah, I think the point, modeling, healthy digital usage habits for sure is important, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you so much, Sarah. It was so good to talk to you. Love your name, by the way. And people kind of are I'm a little bit older than you, but, like, people our age, there was, like, 6 other Sarahs in my elementary school classes, so,
Oh my
um,
gosh.
it
Yeah.
was definitely more common back then.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me. This was fun.
Yeah, so if you want to pick up Momfluenced, like I said, I listened to it on Audible, it wasn't you reading it, so, um, it's fine, but no, I really, I enjoyed the voice of the person. Like some books I get, I'm just like, I can't
Right.
finish this book because I cannot stand this person reading it.
Mhm. No, she's
But
great.
yeah, yeah, she was great. I loved it. So check out Momfluenced, Audible, Kindle,
All the places.
all the places. Just go ahead and pick it up. And it was really fascinating. I want to say, like it took a lot of turns that I wasn't expecting. So like just from the title, like if you look at the title and you're like, oh, okay, this is going to be about this, and you're like, oh no, there's a lot more to it. Um, so I really enjoyed it, and thank you so much for taking the time to
Yeah.
talk to my audience, and we will yeah, go check out her book.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Sarah.
Yep, have a good one.
Thanks. Bye.
Uh, bye.